He sat by the corner of Maple Street, wrapped in an old coat that barely kept out the cold, his hands rough and trembling as he cupped them around a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. To most people passing by, he was just another face among the forgotten, one more man whose story the world no longer had time to hear. But beneath the layers of dirt and years, behind the eyes that had seen too much, was a name that once meant something to someone. His name was Thomas Hale. Once, long ago, he had been a father. The kind who built wooden swings in the backyard and stayed up late telling stories about heroes who never gave up. But somewhere along the way, life had stopped being kind. After losing his job, his wife, and eventually his home, he had drifted from city to city, shelter to shelter, until the faces of the people he loved became memories blurred by time and regret. His daughter, Emily, was the hardest to remember clearly. He used to close his eyes and picture her at 8 years old, standing at the porch in a yellow raincoat, asking him if the rain could wash away mistakes. In a way, that question had haunted him ever since. Emily Hale had grown up far from Maple Street, in a small town where people still waved to their neighbors and remembered birthdays. She worked at the local diner, the kind with faded menus and the smell of coffee that never quite left your clothes. She had learned to survive the hard way. After losing her mother young and never knowing what happened to her father, she built her life out of strength and forgiveness. She had convinced herself that he was gone for good, maybe dead, maybe just lost, and she had made peace with it, or so she thought. Every morning before sunrise, she passed the same street corner on her way to work. The same cracked sidewalk. The same quiet faces. She'd offer a small smile, sometimes a cup of coffee, sometimes a sandwich. It was her small way of making the world less cruel. And then one morning, she noticed a new man sitting by the old bench, gray hair, worn hands, a look that spoke of years spent trying to be invisible. She didn't recognize him. Not yet. That morning was colder than usual, frost creeping along the shop windows. The man sat still, eyes half closed, as if listening to something only he could hear. Emily stopped beside him and asked if he was all right. He nodded slowly, mumbling that he was fine, though the way his fingers shook betrayed the lie. Without thinking much, she handed him a paper cup of coffee and a piece of warm bread she'd saved from the diner. He looked at her like she'd handed him gold. He whispered a quiet thank you. His voice cracked. Something about it tugged at her chest, a strange flicker of familiarity she couldn't place. She smiled, said it was nothing, and walked on. But that night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something in his eyes, something that felt too familiar to ignore. Days passed. Every morning, she saw him in the same spot. Every morning, she stopped. Sometimes she brought breakfast, just a kind word. Slowly, he began to speak. He told her about odd jobs he once had, about how he used to build things with his hands, how he'd made a swing for his daughter when she was little. She asked his daughter's name, but he hesitated, looking away, saying softly that it didn't matter anymore. Emily didn't push. She just listened. He never asked for much, but she noticed he always kept the cup she gave him, washed it, folded the napkins, kept them like small treasures. She started to bring extra blankets, gloves, and one evening, an old photograph of her mother. It wasn't that she meant to show it, it just happened. She cleaned her purse when it slipped out, falling onto the pavement. Thomas picked it up. For a moment, time stopped. His hands froze. His breath caught in his chest. The face in the picture was the woman he had loved, the woman he had failed to save. And standing in front of him, holding that same photo, was the little girl from the porch in the yellow raincoat, grown up. His throat tightened, words trapped beneath years of silence. He wanted to speak, to tell her everything, but fear held him back. What could he say after all this time? That he had been weak? That he had run away because he couldn't bear what he'd become? He placed the photo gently in her hand, eyes trembling. She thanked him with a soft smile, unaware of the storm raging inside him. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. The truth weighed heavier than the winter air. He wanted to tell her, but he was terrified she'd look at him and see only the man who had left. The next morning, Emily found his spot empty. The bench is bare, the blanket gone. She felt an ache she couldn't explain. For weeks, she looked for him, asking around, checking shelters, walking the same streets. Each day that passed without seeing him felt like losing something she hadn't realized she needed. Then one evening, as snow began to fall, she saw a familiar figure sitting outside the diner window. Thin, tired, but unmistakably him. She rushed outside, scolding him for disappearing. He just smiled faintly and said he had found work, cleaning at a nearby church. Inside the diner, she made him sit at a table, ignoring the looks from other customers. She brought him soup, coffee, and that same warm bread. As he ate, she talked about her mother, about how much she missed her father, about how she used to wonder if he'd ever come home. Thomas listened in silence, every word cutting deeper. Finally, his trembling hands set down the spoon. His voice was barely a whisper as he said there was something she needed to know. The next few seconds felt endless. He told her his name. She froze. The sound of it felt like a memory breaking open. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. But when she looked into his eyes, those same eyes that once looked down at her from the porch, filled with love and sorrow, she knew. Her heart broke, not from anger, but from the weight of years lost. Tears welled in her eyes. He tried to stand, apologizing over and over, saying she didn't owe him anything. But she reached out and placed her hand on his. She told him that sometimes forgiveness isn't something people earn, it's something we give to free ourselves. He wept, quietly, the kind of tears that come when a man finally lays down his burden. After that night, things changed. Slowly, gently, she helped him rebuild. She got him a job washing dishes at the diner, then a small room behind the church. He insisted on paying her back, but she told him that wasn't how kindness worked. Every day, they shared coffee before her shift. He told her stories of her childhood she'd forgotten, the day she learned to ride a bike, the time she baked cookies and forgot the sugar. She laughed, and he listened like each sound healed something inside him. Months turned to seasons. The man who once sat invisible on a street corner now had purpose again. The town knew him as the quiet man who swept the church steps and always carried a small folded picture in his coat pocket, the one of his daughter smiling at 8 years old. One spring afternoon, the diner hosted its annual town fair. The air smelled of cinnamon and rain. Emily was setting up a table when she turned and saw her father standing near the edge of the crowd, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. He looked uncertain, almost shy. She walked up to him and took the flowers, saying they were perfect. They sat together, watching children run by, the sound of laughter filling the air. He told her he never thought life would give him another chance. She told him it wasn't life that did, it was love that waited. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky gold, he turned to her and said softly that he was proud of her. She smiled, eyes glistening, and leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel like a ghost of his own life. In that small town, beneath the hum of evening and the scent of bread baking from nearby homes, a father and daughter sat together, finally whole again. No grand miracles. No dramatic endings. Just the quiet, extraordinary beauty of two hearts remembering that love, no matter how lost, always finds its way home. Because sometimes, the person you save is the same one who's been waiting to save you.